Let's start by defining and introducing information security versus cybersecurity. Many individuals in the past actually have confused information security, or what we call InfoSec, with the more modern, implementations of security in the cybersecurity world, right? In the past, security programs actually included policies and programs and technology, like the traditional firewalls in place to actually block traffic from the outside or even from the inside as well, right? So most attacks nowadays start actually from the inside. And if I represent this in here, of course, we have the boundary of a firewall here. And think about that this is the internet, right? And traffic actually coming into the organization. Traditionally, we actually have tried to segment our network and not only block, traffic and inspect them and increase the visibility and the control that we have within the infrastructure. But however, those programs were originally designed only to protect the traditional CIA. That stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That's not the CIA from the US government, right? So confidentiality meaning that, you want to protect sensitive data from being accessed and, being read by unauthorized users. And then the I is for integrity. That's making sure that data or systems have not been altered or modified, by an attacker. And then availability, of course, to make sure that all systems are available at all the time to authorized users. The number one attack that we have seen is denial of service and distributed denial of service attacks. So that's what DDoS stands. That's against availability. Mitigation, of course, is actually to include controls and visibility to get early warning whenever there's potential denial of service attack. Now, as far as actually confidentiality, the number one mitigation is the use of encryption. And I'll just put very brief in here, ENC, for encryption. That's encryption in motion, so in transit. So whenever two devices are actually communicating to each other, let's say, device A to device B are communicating, encrypting the data between those two devices. And also include data at rest. That means whenever you have a database, encrypting the data in a database or a file or in any type of form that exists within a system or within the cloud. And also data in use or in process, as a system is actually processing or using that data, right? So those are concepts that you need to know for the exam. And that's the reason that I'm actually briefly introducing them in here. But we're going to cover them throughout the course in different opportunities that we have. Now, the last acronym here is I for integrity, right? And in this case, as I mentioned, is making sure that data or systems haven't been modified by an attacker. And the number one thing that is used to verify the integrity of devices and data is hashing. And we're actually going to go over later in different encryption and hashing algorithms. You're going to learn a lot of different concepts like the use of traditional protocols like MD5 versus more modern protocols like SHA, SHA-256, 512, and what those numbers represent. You're going to be covering that later in the course. Now, in cybersecurity, we have a lot of other elements that are introduced. For example, cybersecurity programs and policies recognize that organizations definitely have to be vigilant, resilient, and ready to protect, but also to defend in the case of an incident. And that's why in cybersecurity, incident response and resiliency is extremely important. Now, specifically, there's a terminology or an acronym called DFIR, and it's very popular in the industry. That stands for Digital Forensics Incident Response. It's the ability for you to build a program in place, not only technology, but also people, to be able to respond to incident. Analysts in a security operations center, that's another term that you have to actually learn. Security operations center is basically the heart of an incident response program, on where you have different analysts looking at different systems like security information, event manager systems, and nowadays, we have security orchestration, automation, and response, a term called SOAR. These analysts, basically, they act and they work in a tier deployment, if you will. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to draw here a little pyramid, right? Not to say that this is a pyramid scheme, but to represent the different tiers or levels of a SOC, right? Typically, most organizations have a SOC that have 2 or 3 tier levels. So I'm going to draw 1, 2, and 3 here. In tier 1, that's where you're going to see the majority of your analysts. You're going to have junior analysts responding to different events, trying to automate as well a lot of the tasks and mundane tasks that exist, whenever you actually are looking at events in a security operations center. And then you have the tier 2, where these analysts actually can escalate, some of the investigations. And of course, same thing happen to tier 3. You may have, some very senior analysts, and they can perform threat hunting and, different other operations that we're going to go later in the course and define those, right? The other thing that is new, I will say new, but it's newer, cybersecurity has been here for quite some time, but it's also risk management and oversight, right? And it's the ability for you to actually operationalize the way that you look at risk and the way that, not only prioritize things and create even heat maps, within your environment to see what devices and what environments may be of higher risk, but also, how to potentially even shift risk and how to be able to discover the hidden risk, that may exist within your organization, right? The other thing that you will see nowadays a lot in many cybersecurity programs is the use of threat intelligence. And I'm just going to put here threat intel, right? And what that means is actually information about a potential attack, right? It may be from a business peer that they may have observed some type of indicator of a compromise or some type of attack or attack behavior that can be shared with others. It also can be, that your organization can pay to a company to receive a feed, a threat intelligence feed, to be able to get these early warnings about specific attacks and specific tactics and techniques. Or you yourself, actually sharing the information within or outside of the company as well, right? And the other thing is that you have to incorporate within your cybersecurity program is third-party security. So what that means is whenever you have, third party, and I'm just going to put here TP for short, it can be a business partner, right? Somebody that you're actually doing business with. It can be a vendor, right? A vendor plays a big role depending on what you're actually purchasing from them. You may be purchasing software, and we're going to go over, cloud deployments and so on. But nowadays, cloud services are extremely popular, from infrastructure as a service, software as a service, and platform as a service. And you're going to learn about all these terms, right? At any rate, any type of vendor that is providing you a service or a widget, a product, you actually have to take into consideration the risk that you may actually be introducing within your organization. And that's actually part of the newer cybersecurity programs versus traditional information security or InfoSec, right? And as well as a third-party software and hardware dependency management, right? Hardware and software can be absolutely, acquired from other third parties, or you can actually use open source, and which pretty much everybody actually uses open source, right? And every time that you reuse an open source package, you may be introducing different cybersecurity risk, different security risk and security vulnerabilities. So those are a very high level introduction of the differences between the traditional and formerly known InfoSec programs and newer cybersecurity programs.